If you're not into cars or kids' sports tournaments, you should probably skip this episode because it's all these guys can talk about. Adam Carolla.
Yeah, get it on. Bill Maher in studio. I just did his show, Club Random with Bill Maher. First episode premieres today. Not my episode, or yesterday, I should say, with Bill Shatner, who I adore. Good to see you, Bill Maher.
Now, will the audience understand that was sarcasm when the announcer said?
My audience will understand
it. They will understand
Yes.
that I'm not into kids and cars. Okay.
I know you're not into cars because I was watching your show last weekend on Friday, and one of the panelists said she's into F1, and you're like, whatever, you're into NASCAR. And she's like, F1 and NASCAR is...
They're different?
Well, it'd be like saying London Philharmonic and Ted Nugent. They're both just music.
Yeah, I get it. Well, I think what I said to her was, why do you enjoy watching traffic? And
Yes.
that would still be my response to both of those things, I think. But I'm not sure what F1 is.
It's just the highest of the food chain.
Oh, really?
Ayrton Senna. See the Doc Senna?
What's better about it?
It's like saying, why is a Ferrari better than an Oldsmobile? Like, because it's just that much more advanced.
But aren't NASCAR drivers driving the best cars?
They're driving the best cars within the regulations that they put in place.
Oh.
See, look at us ironically talking about cars. All right, off to my daughter's soccer game, and then we'll wrap it up.
Exactly.
So, congratulations on the show.
Thank you.
It was fun just sitting down with you and your Club Random and letting the hair hang down a little.
Yeah, again, was it necessary that I do this? No. But I'm having more fun than I've had in a while. Not that I don't love my real show, because I love that the most, but there is something about just, first of all, I can't be drinking and getting high when I'm doing real time. I mean,
Right.
I'm talking to important people.
Sure.
But like when you come over, oh, wait, that came out wrong. And also, not everything is politics. And for too long, I've been going out to dinner with people, and they've been saying, you should do a podcast because, you're interesting on all these other topics, and we never hear you talk about it because the show is too political. And I'm like, okay, fine, I give in, I'll do it. And they were right. It is fun, and it is good to, once in a while, for just an hour or two a week, talk about things that aren't political, because political... First of all, you're cutting off like 90% of the country who doesn't know things.
Right.
They don't know things. You have to know things to watch real time. You have to know. I mean, we had one guest. I love this kid. He does, Adam Walid, he does, TikTok videos and has more followers than I'll ever have. But I said last week on the show, my real-time show, we talked about the ACLU and NATO. Mm-hmm. And he's like, I don't know what those things are. I'm like, exactly.
Right.
And and so the show is for people who don't know what the ACLU and NATO. I mean, you can know also what those things are and enjoy the show, I think. But, it's a way to, I think, expand the audience.
So for you, on that note, can we talk about you and how you came up and, how you evolved and how you started with comedy? I've known you for a long time, but I don't know a ton about your backstory.
Yeah, please. I'd love to talk about me.
All right, well, let's talk about you.
Go ahead.
You grew up in New York?
No, I grew up in New Jersey. Across the river. My father was in radio news back in the days when every radio station had news at the top of the hour. I listened to WABC in New York, Cousin Brucey, if people remember that, from back east, and Dan Ingram and all those great DJs. That was my jam when I was 12 years old, was to listen to that all day. But even the rock and roll station had news at the top of the hour. Even kids, we were forced to listen at the top of the hour to 5 minutes of news. That I'm sure is just like from Jupiter to any kid listening today. But that's who we were. And my father did that, not on ABC. He did it on other radio stations in the New York area. He was on something called the Mutual Broadcasting System, which became defunct in the mid-'70s, and then he was out of work, and then I had to turn to selling drugs. But that's we're skipping ahead in the story.
Well, can I drill down on one aspect of that? You have a kind of a precision with your comedy and with when you host. Not when you interviewed me. I think you're faked off your ass. But normally, you bring an air of professionalism and kind of precision. You know, you're not one of those comedians that's kind of hanging and doing audience work and where you from and all that. You put on a suit and you have your jokes, and there's and in real times this ways too, there's a certain precision to it. Is that something you picked up from your dad?
Maybe. I don't know about that. He certainly was precise. You had to be. I remember he had this collection of stopwatches, because this is an era we're talking about when no wonder he was kind of tense when he got home and needed 3 martinis. You had to do this 5-minute broadcast on the news live without rehearsal, and you had no time to plan out how it was going to fit into the 5 minutes. You had to do that on the fly. You would rip the news off the wire, so you would see what the actual news was, and you'd take that off like a ticker tape. And then you would assemble this and have to read it almost as you wrote it and have it come in exactly at the 5-minute mark. That's a tough job. No wonder he was tense, and that's why you needed a stopwatch, because you couldn't go over and you couldn't go under. I can't imagine doing that. So maybe that is where I got it from. Maybe it's in my DNA, but you're right. I am super precise, especially in my stand-up. I mean, I just did a special that'll be on HBO in April. I just taped it in Miami, and they were like, "Wow, you don't mess around here," because I gave the bullet points for the teleprompter to the guy, and he was like, "Okay, this is not where you're from, and what else?" I hate comics who stand up there and go, "What else?" I don't want to waste their time. I know what else.
Yeah,
because I worked it out, and I want the show to be dense. I don't want to waste people's time. I want to smudge into the hour the best possible thoughts and jokes following those thoughts that I could come up with over the last 4 years. That's what a stand-up special is to me. That's not how everybody works. Just the way in music, some people like it raw. Some people like Fish and the Grateful Dead, and they like jam bands that go on for a half hour improvising. I don't, but I like the Rolling Stones. They're raw. I like the Beatles a little more because they're finished every note, and there are studio tricks. Good. If it sounds good, who gives a fuck if there's studio tricks? Good. Those tricks are working on me.
Yeah, no, I agree. What drives me nuts are the comedians when you go to the Comedy Store and you're going to do a 15 or 20-minute set or something, and there's some guy up in front of you, ostensibly there to work the set out, and he's like, what else? Hey, where are you from? It's
right.
Like, what? That's not your set. That's you just standing on stage.
Right, and you shouldn't be paying for that. There are comics who work that way, at least back in the day, I remember, and it was like Joan Rivers used to do something called Joan Rivers Workshop. Mm-hmm. That was different than when you saw Joan Rivers in concert when she would be doing her real show. Joan Rivers Workshop was okay for it was like the annex of a department store. It's less money that you're paying. You're paying something, I imagine, but it's her workshop. So we're not going to see the polished, finished product, and that's okay as long as you're honest about that. But don't charge me money and then be working out your shit. I mean, that's what I started out. I'm sure you did too in the comedy clubs. They call it showcase clubs because yes, you were showcasing. You were working out your shit. You were, they used to say you need a place to be bad. Well, we fulfilled that. We were bad, and that's why it was they didn't pay us. And why people would, feel like they felt free to heckle.
When you grew up, were you funny? Could you put a sort of turn it into a commodity? Were you a class clown? Were you popping off and cracking wise? Because there's a part of me that sees you as a very skilled comedian, and then another part of me that sees you as a serious person. So I don't know how you reacted in the environment of school.
Well, I think that's a good assessment because I think I try to do a kind of comedy that's based mostly on serious topics. I was never the Seinfeldian, he does it brilliantly. I always thought he was a genius because he could take some topic that was not very serious and make it interesting and not insulting to the most intelligent person in the world, socks and trivial matters like that. He would see something in them. I could never do that. I like to take big, meaty, intellectually nutritious topics and try to find the funny in them. But they themselves, if you took out the jokes, it's not terribly funny to talk about some of the things, politics and even matters of, we talk about sex and drugs and rock and roll, and I talk about everything in my act. But they're kind of like big topics. So yes, but as a kid, if you're asking, I was never the clown type. I did want to be a comedian when I was very young. I knew I was going to do this when I was less than 10 years old.
Really?
I was a very shy kid, and I, of course, didn't have the kind of confidence that kids have today because they're raised wrong and they're too entitled.
Self-esteem movement.
Right. Yes. So I never breathed a word of that because I was afraid I'd be made fun of. Oh, really? You want to be a comedian? Good luck with that. But that's what was in my mind all those years. Excuse me, is that I am going to be a comedian. So that's what was going on in my head. And in the classroom, I would say I was trying more to be the class comedian, not the class clown. I wasn't the guy throwing spitballs. I would try to say, and sometimes did say, things that again, the bar is low in school. You're bored. You want any distraction. So, you got a good captive audience. But if I could say something that made the teacher laugh, that was a big victory.
Yeah, it's interesting, class clown versus class comedian.
Yes.
I never really thought about that.
Yes, there were clowns, and I was not one of them.
So were you a pretty serious student?
I was a great student. Excuse me. I was, straight A's, very afraid of failing, not because my parents would beat me. I guess I just didn't want to be disappointing to them, or I don't know. I just was very afraid of not doing well in school. I think in high school I had a perfect attendance record. I don't think I missed one day of high school. How nerdy is that?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. So there's like comedians that are just sort of creative types, and then all the baggage that comes along with it. They're disorganized. They're not that focused. We all know people, and people say to me, "Who's the funniest guy you know?" I go, "You don't know his name.
Right.
He can't get his." I always, I know you don't like car analogies, but I would say that it's not how much horsepower your engine has. It's how much can you get to the rear wheels. And we all know people that are kind of 1,000 horsepower brains, but they can never get out of their own way. They can't get it to the rear wheels. They can't get it to the pavement. I think most comedians know other comedians that are super talented, but just not getting it to the rear wheels. And guys like you and guys like Jimmy Kimmel, they're really funny people who also approach it like a studious A student and bring that ethic to it.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's very analogous to music. There are people who just do it kind of raw, and then there are people who spend 6 months in the studio making Hotel California because they want every note to be right. And they're both good. You can find great value, and they both can work. I happen to be the latter type. Yes, you're right. I'm a worker. I do like precision. I love, sometimes people say, why do you still do stand-up? I love the tinkering. I love the idea of, I moved this joke 2 jokes earlier and it works twice as good. Or I changed one word. That I love. To me, that's like building the ship in the bottle. Those people who build a little ship inside of a bottle, and it's like, what the fuck is that? Well, I mean, all of life is just killing time till you die. And to me, that's just how elegantly for yourself you can do that. And that to me is, stand-up is kind of like, I guess at this point you could call it a hobby because I don't have to do it, but I do it because I love it. And it's that building the ship in the bottle thing. I just like tinkering and I'm working with it in my little workshop. And then, of course, I go out and take it and do it in front of people. But it wouldn't come across as good to people unless I was in my little workshop, or in the basement at my house, sanding things, plotting to kill my family like The Stepfather, but then not.
So speaking of family, you said your dad was kind of an intense guy or a tense guy?
He was tense when he got home from work because that was a tense job. Mm-hmm. He really wasn't a tense guy, but the job made him that way. I mean, he was much more easygoing, except, he chose that as a profession, and I can see why that was a kind of a job that required a few martinis after you got off. Of course, it was also the era. It was the Mad Men era. That's what people did, is they had 3 drinks and then drove home.
Right.
Which is what he did every night.
Yeah. In a car with no airbags or a headrest.
And probably no seatbelts.
Right.
And half in the bag on the Garden State Parkway or the Palisades Parkway coming back from Midtown Manhattan to our suburban manse in New Jersey. I say manse, small house. I mean, when I see it now, it's like you cannot believe how small but people were smaller and they just needed less. And, the house that I grew up in, they bought on the GI Bill for, I think, $24,000, which is about, my car probably cost 3 times as much.
Yeah. Yeah, I grew up the same way. House I grew up in cost $10,000.
I mean, my room that I grew up in was like half the size of this room we're in right now.
Yeah, well, speaking of kids these days and how you grew up and how I grew up, I worry that kids don't have enough downtime. They're staring at something, they're playing some, this edict of you got to get them involved in everything. You got to sign them up for every sport. You have to get them involved in every club. They have to learn 5 languages. They have
overscheduled.
They have to learn to code on their computer and stuff like that. And it's like, I learned a lot from being bored as a kid, from having serious downtime, nothing to do.
Absolutely.
Go make your own fun. Go outside and do something.
They call that overscheduled, and the kids are. You like you say, you have piano lessons on Tuesday and then karate lessons, and mom is always chauffeuring you from one of these activities to the next, and it's horrible. I think it's horrible the way they do that to kids, and I think it's stultifying to their imagination. Yes, my whole childhood, what I remember is coming home from school, which, by the way, again, something that you would get arrested for, literally now, letting a child walk home alone from school. A child alone, they find that to be just an abomination, whereas I thought it was fantastic. Get your ass to school, get it home, and then I would fly into the house, fly upstairs, change into my play clothes, and then fly out the door again without saying one word to my mother and play. And in my house, my town, we had something called the 6 o'clock whistle. Oh, gosh. It's like Thornton Wilder, our town. And a whistle would blow at 6 o'clock. And it was like, oh, okay, because dinner was at 6. Got to get my ass home. But until then, I was out, just like doing what the fuck ever. I don't know. You'd go over to some other kid's house. You'd collect acorns or fucking throw dirt at each other or, play army. There was a stream at one part of the town. You can go in and like make a dam or, I don't know. You just would play outside and it was a great stimulation for your imagination because, as you said, you had to make something out of nothing. It wasn't like there was some structured thing and people telling you what to do and you were learning a specific, do I know how to play piano today? And maybe I would if I didn't have an upbringing like this. So what? I wouldn't have never been a great piano player, but I wouldn't be the person I am, I don't think.
Yeah, speaking of kids and going out and playing, we have so much obesity with kids now. And I heard you talking with Ben Shapiro about it. And this notion of, as it pertained to COVID, we had this great opportunity to really go, oh, we can talk about obesity now. We can talk about exercise. We can talk about outdoors, all the healthy shit you just kind of spoke of. And we swept it right under the carpet. We tried to shame everyone who wanted to talk about it. Those people are the highest risk or amongst the highest risk in the group. Kids, it's insane what we're doing to them. And yet you bring it up and you're a pariah.
I have been a pariah many times because I do bring it up. And it's the ultimate third rail. It's such an interesting topic for future historians when they study this era, and they will find out of all the sensitive topics, and there are so many topics that should be and are more sensitive, this is the one that gets the most reaction, and you absolutely can't go near. And, I did an editorial about it before COVID. It was, I think, when the Democrats were first trying to find their candidate in 2020. So there was at least a dozen of them were running, and they would have their debates. This is 2019. And, of course, the big topic in every debate was health care. And how are we going to pay for health care, blah, blah, blah. And I did an editorial saying, I don't care whose plan you adopt. It can be Bernie Sanders' plan. It can be Elizabeth Warren's. It can be the man in the moon's. It's not going to work because the people are not participating in their own health, and they are never asked to. And then, did all the facts about obesity, and James Corden then attacked me, I thought, fairly viciously, personally, about this. And, to me, it was such a cowardly thing to do, because if he had taken the opposite approach and said, Bill is right about this, I'm someone who has struggled with this, but he's right. Unless we get a handle on this, unless we look in the mirror on this, unless we're realistic with ourselves, because we're through the looking glass on this, where we don't, fat shaming, how dare you. Actually, we fit shame. We say to people, eat something, who are not overweight.
Yeah.
And
we go after Adele for losing 70 pounds.
Literally. And, I really think if he had taken a different tack, he could have saved a lot of people. Whereas now, I've said this recently on some show, I really think the people who will not talk about this in the media, you have blood on your hands, because you are not helping people by normalizing something that is, factually the number one killer in America. It was before COVID. It was killing people slowly. And with COVID, of course, it killed them quickly. We know these are facts. 78% of the people who were hospitalized or died from COVID were obese. I don't know why this is such a controversial subject. Obviously, I understand people don't want to be confronted with their failures. I don't. I have many failures. I said in that piece that James Corden was attacking that there was a time in my life when I drank too much, and I understood that. And people said to me sometimes, maybe you should go a little less heavy on the drinking. And I would say to them, yeah, you know what? You're right. I should. And then, of course, I wouldn't. But I didn't say, how dare you drunk shame me?
Right.
There's a big difference between coming back at somebody and saying, how dare you even mention this? And saying, okay, I got it. You know what? You don't have to push it in my face. And I wasn't being mean in my edit. I've never been mean, I don't think. I've never told a cheap fat joke. I did in the past when we all did, when it was okay to do that.
Right.
But there was no cheap jokes in there. There was no, we're going to make fun of you. It's not about making fun. I feel like this is something that if you're a friend, don't you do the truthful thing that makes someone a healthier person?
Well, I'm always trying to kind of figure out the motivation of a James Corden in that particular case. Like, is it to just get applause from people who are on his side of the scale, so to speak? Is it and then also with so much of the pushback, the kind of things you say, sometimes the kind of things I say. I'm like, I still don't know what the point is in this.
I mean, I don't know what's in a person's head either, but what I do know is that it was easy. It's easy to be, this mean man, Bill, this mean guy is saying mean things, and here I am coming to your aid. And I've heard people say this many times when this comes up. People struggle with this. I've had that come back at me a number of times, to which I say, of course they struggle. Everything is struggle. Life is a struggle. But look at people 50 years ago. We look like a completely different species. People were not obese like they are now. Do you think cake wasn't delicious in 1969? Of course it was. People struggle. People struggle with it, and they always have. But they didn't just throw up their hands and say, it's a struggle. How could I possibly resist eating too much food and eating the wrong food? Well, you can. And yes, we have problems that are should be addressed, like food deserts, like places where people can't even get decent food. But then deal with that. And yes, it's very hard to eat well if you are not well off, or at least middle class. There are plenty of poor people who do not have the opportunity to get good food. But I would say this about that: no one ever needs to have soda,
right,
with your food. And that's a lot of what the obesity comes from, is soda. So, you could save money and also help your health by not having soda. And everyone could do that. We could be the can-do society on this instead of the throw up your hands and, oh my gosh, what I can't do anything about this. Well, you can. Yes, there are things that we should do as a society to help. But, when Michelle Obama tried to make this an issue, they attacked her incredibly viciously. And this was a First Lady project.
Right.
It should not have even been controversial. And it was mostly about, as you were bringing up, kids. Let's get the kids in better shape. Who could be against that? Well, it turned out a lot of people.
Yeah, it's really, and you brought up 1969, did they have cake in 1969? Go back and look at the movie Woodstock. And see what those people looked like.
That's what I'm saying.
See what a 22-year-old looked like in 1969.
Or look at the crowd that's looking up at the moon launch.
Right.
There's no obese people in the crowd.
Well, you think back to, grade school, junior high. There was one fat kid that was probably assigned to each class, and that was it. If there was one, there was one fat kid and one kid with a leg that was too short that had the extra heel added onto his shoe for some reason.
And the fat kid wasn't that fat. What we thought of, I remember in that piece I did, we showed the picture from like 100 years ago of the fat man in the circus.
Mm-hmm.
He looks just like a normal guy now.
Yeah.
And that was the fat guy. And the thing about what we're going through now with the epidemic and all the deaths and everything is that the science doesn't change. What our ideal of what is obese has changed, but the science hasn't. And in the science, even if you're moderately obese, the chance of hospitalization was greatly increased, like 4 or 5 times. And I'm talking about like 30 or 40 pounds overweight. I'm not talking about, sometimes you see people who are hundreds of pounds overweight. That just didn't even exist.
Well, speaking of science, I was watching Real Time last week, and you had a professor or an expert, not sure exactly what his title was, on nuclear energy.
Oh, he was the former Secretary of Energy under Obama, Ernest Moniz, yeah.
Yeah. Kind of reminded me of the Quaker Oats guy a little bit.
Yes. White-haired, professorial, correct.
Yes, but I pulled a quick clip of it because I am vexed by nuclear energy as maybe you are, in that I am for it because I'm for clean energy.
Right.
And I don't know what happened to it or what the plan was. We'll play the clip of the Dr. Ernest Moniz. Yes.
You are for using nuclear power?
Yes. Look, right today, nuclear power supplies 20% of our electricity. If we were to eliminate that, I don't know how
But we
make
are
up for it.
I mean, California, as we speak, is decommissioning Diablo Canyon.
Yes,
which has been
I wrote an article in the LA Times against that.
Right.
Without success, of course. But we need that, and we also need to build a new generation of nuclear plants. This is carbon-free. It's been safe, and we don't have a lot of options, especially when wind and solar are going to grow, but they are intermittent. And we need also a strong baseload of carbon-free power. That's what nuclear gives us. And right now, there's never been more innovation in this space than we see today.
And nuclear is splitting atoms, right? Whereas fusion...
All right, we got it. I feel like this is almost like obesity. It's like,
well,
why aren't we talking about this? And the answer is, it's not popular to talk about it.
I think the problem here, the underlying problem, is something called win-win. Americans got it in their heads that everything has to be a win-win. Mm-hmm. And that's not the way life works. The way life works, especially with weighty matters like this, is least bad. That should become the saying instead of win-win. There's very few win-wins out there. What there are out there are least bad options. Does anyone want nuclear? No, of course not, because 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, Fukushima. When it goes bad really bad, and that's not good. But it's the least bad option. We either slowly kill ourselves, what we're doing now with fossil fuels, or I wrestled with this nuclear one for a long time. I don't think I was always on the page because, yes, it's very scary what can happen when it goes bad. The radiation from Fukushima is probably in the water when I go to Hawaii and New Year's Eve and swim there. But look, there's just no great, perfect option. And just build them so they don't fucking break.
Yeah.
Just don't. Just don't ever let it happen again. And I think they probably can get there. And even if they can't, I'm sorry, it's the least bad option.
Yeah, I agree. That's my feeling on many of these matters. Like, what is the alternative? And the alternative is, well, they'll say, renewables, wind and solar. But if we're not there yet, then we need to build a bridge to sort of buy us time to get us there.
Every country that has given up nuclear and state, like California, has had to revert to coal because there was a shortfall. They got ahead of themselves. Germany did this. Let's get rid of the nuclear. Great, because nuclear is bad and the eco warriors hate it, and I consider myself an eco warrior. But then there was a shortfall, and at the end of the day, you can't let the lights go out. People want their fucking phones, and they want their TVs, and they want their air conditioners, and they want the lights to stay on. And so they wound up having to use the thing that they were trying to not use to begin with.
Well, I know you had your ongoing saga with the solar panel shed.
Yes.
That you've referenced many times.
God.
Now, I've screamed about this for a million years because I've done a lot of building projects, and I've always told everyone, you're living in Santa Monica in a rent control apartment, fine. Go buy some property and try to pull a permit and try to build something on your own property, and then tell me how much you love the government. Because it's easy to do it from where you're at, but go deal with them.
California has got to get its arms around this issue. I mean, it just does. First of all, we know there's been an exodus from this state. Now, that's partly because of high taxes, and it's partly because fire season is all year round. But it's also because people can't fucking do anything, as you're talking about. I just read that the cost of building a single unit for the homeless has now risen to $837,000. I just don't think people understand the level of graft that is built into the system, the level of corruption. And that's what I was getting at when I made that crusade about my solar. I mean, first of all, I just did want to get it hooked up. But can you imagine the level of corruption, the level of bureaucracy that I was ranting and raving about this on the air for over a year, and they still couldn't get it done? I have a picture of 11 people at my house who finally showed 11 people to turn on a light bulb.
Yeah.
It's basically, I mean, first of all, I had to build a shed to house the thing, which is about the size of that. This is the box that apparently the solar comes into. I had to build its own home, which probably could house the homeless. People could live in that shed. It's a beautiful shed that houses a little box.
Right.
That took forever. It has to be 55 feet from the curb. It has to this. It has to that. I mean, it used to come in on a pole. They probably could have done it just on that, but no. Had to have its own shed. And then all the people who had to come out and see it. Look, I can't get into the ins and outs. I don't want to. It was too painful a memory. But all the regulations that, I mean, it's I don't know if it's Orwellian or Kafkaesque or both of them. It was just strange, very strange. What the hoops that you had to jump through to do something that the state was advising you to do. Solar power was something I thought I was being a good citizen trying to hook up.
It's stifling. Years before your shed debacle, I mean, it's been 15 years. I got a house. It's been more than 15 years up in the Hollywood Hills, and I was like, I'm going to put some solar panels up. And good. Thank you. You're welcome. This is what we'd like our citizens to do. And there's a regulation that it's not in any other city or state where the master shutoff switch for the solar needs to be on the other side of the gate. Oh. And they're explaining to you that everywhere else, it can just be on the panel in the box or whatever. The fire department could come shut off the master switch in an emergency. But in LA County, it's got to be outside on the curb, which would have meant trenching 200 feet and laying conduit down and doing something, and it would have added another 50 grand to that. And I was like, then fuck it.
Right. Then fuck it is what so many people say about so many things out here. And eventually what they're going to say is, then fuck it to the Democratic Party. This is an Achilles heel to this party that they have got to come to terms with. I mean, they couldn't build a railroad that they tried from L.A. to San Francisco. Same thing with the housing, the homeless kind of thing. It just, the cost, I think, per mile rose to something like $200 million per mile, whereas in France, they did it for like $13 million per mile, pretty much the same railroad. And France is not known as a country without unions.
Right.
Or regulations,
right,
or socialism. And somehow they did it for so much less. People have got to understand there are just too many people with their hand out. There are too many people who are unnecessary in this equation. And this is kind of like beyond politics, or it should be, but it's going to get hung on, and deservedly so, on the Democrats, because they run this state. It's not like the Republicans are great on this either, but they don't run the state right now. The Democrats do.
Quick break to talk about J.B. Weld, world's strongest bond. The brand DIYers and pros have trusted for over 50 years. Use their epoxies, super glues, putty sticks, wraps for projects big and small on practically any surface: metal, wood, plastics, glass, ceramics. Keep it in your kitchen drawer, toolbox, with your craft supplies, and, of course, your garage as well. Also, the proud owner of Herculiner, the original DIY truck bed liner. If you're looking for the world's strongest truck bed liner, Herculiner has you covered. So I've been a fan of these guys for a million years. I've always used their stuff, and now they've expanded into every form of adhesive and Herculiner as well. It's available at jbweld.com, Home Depot, Lowe's, Walmart, AutoZone, Advanced Auto Parts, O'Reilly, Amazon, Michaels, and more. Proudly made in the USA. It's J.B. Weld. Yeah, what do you think about the mayoral race coming up? You have anybody you like?
Well, I interviewed Karen Bass, right? She's one of the leading, I mean, I like her. I haven't really gotten into those local politics too much. The other guy, what's his name?
The guy who runs the
whatever
farmers
the Grove.
market, the Grove. Yeah, Rick Caruso. Yeah,
Caruso. Yeah, I met him recently at a dinner party. He seemed like a nice guy. I don't know. I don't really get that much into local politics. I don't know how much it really is going to affect me. I'm sure it does, and I'm sure I'd be a better citizen if I did, but I'm kind of busy with trying to absorb all the national news for my real job. And
what is the schedule of your real job? I know you film on Fridays.
Yeah, I work my ass off during the week. Monday is a very heavy workload, writing night, because that's the day I try to put together the editorial that I do at the end of the show, which is about 8 minutes long and probably takes me 20 hours to put together. And so that's a big, heavy writing night. Tuesday, I rewrite it and start working on the issues. We do a lot of new rules. I probably look at 100 new rules to come up with 5.
Right.
That's the process in comedy. Again, like we were talking about at the beginning of your interview here today, it depends on your method, but that's my method is let's be thorough and let's get the best product out to the audience. And that takes a lot of time. I never go out during the week. Thursday is my cram night because the show is Friday. So it's just like when I asked HBO if I could do the podcast, I told them, look, this will take 0 time away from my real job. I don't want to ever take time away. I said, this is just 2 hours. I am not preparing for it at all, as you could see.
I can attest to that. 0 prep.
I'm just going to be drunk off my ass talking to a good friend or someone who I'm meeting for the first time. And this is what I would be. See, Wednesday's the hump day. So that's when we tape the podcast. And I take a 2-hour break normally. I'm just doing it in front of a camera now with people who the audience I think might be interested in hearing me talk to. But I need to work all those hours on the week to make real time the show I want it to be, because it's on, a premium network that you pay for. And I think that people expect and should get the best possible product I can put out based on a week full of work. I would not want to do it any other way.
So for you, I know you don't have kids, you're not married, famously don't and like it that way, which I get. My I didn't really want to have kids either because I felt like my parents didn't want their kids, and I sort of went, yeah, I guess that's how it worked.
Really?
Yeah, I think
you felt that?
Yeah.
Wow.
I certainly knew it. I don't know if the difference between feeling it and knowing it, but it seemed abundantly
that's terrible.
Apparent. It is. It is. But I don't know what influenced you, or did anything influence you? How was your relationship with your parents?
Great. I'm a very lucky person because I had great parents.
And were they around to see the kind of success you've had?
My father died just before. He saw me do the Tonight Show, which was
in
sort
his
of
world. That's a big deal.
Yes, yeah. It was sort of the baccalaureate. You are graduated, and now you are officially in show business, and you don't have to be a tradesman. Although you certainly can, as many people have, done a few Tonight Shows and then fall off the board. But he died. I got politically incorrect, started in 93, and he died the year before. So it's a shame because he was a funny living room comedian who worked in news. And for my life, I really made his resume into a profession. I took the news. I took his funny living room style and made it into a profession. So I think he would have been very gratified to see me do what I do. But that didn't happen. But I know he's watching from heaven. I'm kidding. I mean, it would be great if that. And like, could that be possible? Yes, but it's so ridiculous. I always like it when they show cartoons after somebody dies and they're doing in heaven what they did in life. You know, like Bob Hope has a golf club, and it's like, really?
Yeah.
That's all. That's all.
Rounds can you play?
That's all heaven is. The thing you're doing in life, and then you take it up there, and it's like you're just shooting a great, par game every day.
Well, I said to someone the other day on this subject. I said, no, I don't believe in heaven. They said, well, but then where do you go? Like where,
Right.
And I just said, look, what you have is all the thoughts you've left in the minds of all the people you interacted with while you were here. You're never dead. Abe Lincoln is dead. He doesn't need to be in heaven. I know who Abe Lincoln is. You know what I mean? Like that was my take on it.
That's a great take. I've never heard anyone put it that way. That's actually kind of brilliant. I'm going to kill you and steal that.
Yeah, like why do you have to be alive? You're alive in my head if you go first, preferably. But what I'm saying is like every great or not or family member, your dog, your first dog, Lucky. That's just you have. It's in your head. That's your memory. That's why they're alive as long as you're alive because they're in your head.
Yeah,
which is why you should do good things and say funny things and do that
and be wise and try to pass on. Right. It's almost. Life itself is just a shame because, like you perfect yourself and then die.
Right.
It's like I'm 66. I'm kind of, I think, at the top of my game in everything because I'm still, healthy. That was me knocking wood. But, would it be better if I was 36 and this good? Yeah, because then I'd have all these years ahead to live out as this top of game entity. Whereas, of course, now maybe I'll be able to do this until I'm 86. But, it also would be nice to do it when you were, people could still look at you because at a certain point they won't be able to.
Right.
At a certain point people, they get put out to pasture in television because they just kind of like, you just look at them and it's like you're just reminded that they're not young anymore. They just look shitty. I think Larry King, Johnny Carson, the people they just, kind of like, you've been out in the sun too much.
Right. You start melting at a certain point.
You start melting.
Right. So your dad, look, he saw your hit on Carson, and that's pretty damn good. But
yeah, he was proud. And they were great when I told them I was going into comedy because they could have been like a lot of parents would have been and said, oh, come on, do something realistic. And of course, I made that easy for them because I wasn't asking for money. I was always a very independent kid, too much so as a kid. It drove my father nuts. I didn't share as much as they would want me to. As someone once said, I packed a tight suitcase. Mm-hmm. So it didn't hurt them at all when I said I'm going into comedy because it wasn't like, and I need money to live off of.
Right.
But I also didn't say I'm selling pot for a living. I just left it unsaid. Right. It was a don't ask, don't tell policy. We're not going to ask how you're living, and you're not going to tell us. And it's good because we don't have the money to give it to you anyway. This is after the defunct of the mutual broadcasting system, so there wasn't a lot of money coming in. And that was fine, but they certainly could have been, as many parents are, discouraging of something that seemed like such a pie-in-the-sky dream.
Was your mom then around long enough to see many of the things you did?
Yes, absolutely. She was around till 2007, so, she saw all of Politically Incorrect and the first, 6 years of, or maybe 3 or 4 years of Real Time. But of course, moms are moms. They don't really, it doesn't really ever get into their heads who you are. I remember once, I think I've told this story before, but it always amuses me. I was staying at the, I forget the hotel in Washington, the Mayflower or something, one of the big hotels, and I said to her, she always used to ask me what what was the hotel like when I was on the road. And they said, they gave me the presidential suite. And she said, why? And I said, Mom, I'm kind of a big shot now. And she said, oh, yeah, I just remember when I was holding your little hand. And that's always like my memory of my mother is like, and I can think everybody's mother is kind of that way. It's like, I remember your little hand, so just don't fucking get out of line.
It's weird. There's some guys I can picture as a little kid. But like,
not me.
You ever see, like, you see Bill Maher and you go, I can picture him as a 9-year-old.
The former attorney general?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I picture him as a kid. I could see what he looked like as a kid.
The fat kid.
Yeah, he looks kind of like a kid
kind of right.
now at 67 or whatever he is. He's got the look of a little kid. I can't picture Bill Maher.
No, I had a crew cut. I had white hair, like with the kid they would call Whitey, very blonde. Crew cut, very nervous. I had a pit in my stomach most of my childhood.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, going to school, I was shorter than most of the kids. Thank God I sprang up at least to 5'8", which is about average, maybe a little less.
Where does your confidence come from now? Because you do seem very confident.
Sure, but it took a long time. I mean, I was painfully shy as a kid. Could not really ever approach anybody, and even in my 20s and so forth. I mean, going up to a girl, I was always still trying to make friends with guys who could talk to girls.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I think it came from success. Mm-hmm. I think one reason people like to become famous is because it eliminates the need to introduce yourself. It's your opening line is "Thank you very much."
Right.
That's a great advantage in life if you're a shy person. But of course, it's just years and years, and just you become more familiar with what could happen if I go up to somebody and they don't respond as I would want them to. Nothing will happen.
Right.
I'll move on to the next person. And 2 seconds later, I don't have to be thinking about it. But there's a great amount of anxiety. And when I was a child, I feared so much being ostracized because sometimes I was. In school, kids are awful. Kids need to be civilized. Kids need to be taught to be moral. They're feral. That's what the book The Lord of the Flies is about. Mm-hmm. Kids are horrible, and they don't care. They don't even know they're being horrible.
No.
They just do it. And I was not a popular kid. There was a kid who was ostracized more than me. But some days they decided it was me. It was mostly him, but I was always worried that I was the next one. And sometimes I was. And childhood I was never meant to be a child. I didn't like other children. And I was so glad when it was over.
Yeah. I know. And in that, when we were growing up, the whole idea was to pretend like you were older. If you're a guy, you'd smoke. If you're a woman, you'd stuff your bra. You know what I mean? Like this whole attempt at being older. And now there's this delayed adolescence that goes well into the 40s now, it seems like.
When I was a kid, we admired people who were older. I wanted to be Johnny Carson and James Bond. They were 40, and they were cool, and I couldn't wait to be them. Kids today, they want to be the TikTok asshole who's their age.
Right.
And somebody 40 is like, oh, my God, ancient. And it's like, no, that's when you're cool. You're in charge. You understand life, finally. You're attractive to women. You got your shit together. You have money. Everything about it was better. And I'm not sure if that's what goes on in the minds of kids today.
So you don't want kids, obviously, but
I think that bus has sailed. And no, I mean, of all the things in life, and of course we all evolve, each decade I always say you're kind of a different person. Your character doesn't change, but your goals change. Mm-hmm. And what's important to your life changes. Sometimes the people in your life change. The one thing for me that has been steady as a rock is kids. Hated them when I was one, don't want them now, didn't want them in 30s, 40s, 50s. That has never changed. I mean, people think I don't hate kids. I just don't want to be around them. I don't want to interact with them in any way, especially now when they're such brats and they're so entitled and they have such a sense of being invited into the conversation when they shouldn't be. I think we talked about this when you were at my house. This idea that you could just sit down with the adults uninvited into the conversation. I would never have dreamed of doing that.
And that they got a vote. I was always amazed about, you go, hey, you want to go do this? Let me ask my kid,
Right.
Even Donny Osmond, I remember talking to him years ago, and I was like, you want to do X, Y, or Z? And he's like, I got to ask my son.
Right.
And I'm like, no one asked me shit.
No.
I was just told to get out of the way sometimes when people were going somewhere. But this is interesting. And I don't know if this will ring true for you or not. I didn't initially want kids because my parents didn't really want their kids, and kids were a pain in the ass. Because if I ever said to my mom, "Can I get a ride to Teddy Lewis's house in Van Nuys?" I'd be like, "Oh God, Jesus Christ!" Everything was like, "Oh, you're ruining our lives." That's so. I thought kids are a burden, but I had tons of friends because I didn't interact with my family that much. I spent a lot of time with my friends, and I became very reliant and very close to my young friends. So my version of an 11-year-old is much different than your version of an 11-year-old. The 11-year-olds were fucking with you. My 11-year-olds were saving my life, essentially. I was eating at their house. I was going with them if they went dirt bike riding or camping or something like that. So maybe my desire to have kids is not based on my family, because your family was closer with you than my family was with me. So logic would dictate, Bill respects his dad and he loved his family and blah, blah, blah. He should want to pass that along or have that same experience. But yours may be based on kids being so shitty to you.
It may be. Also, I just never had the same interests that they did. I thought they were immature because they were fucking kids. Like, I was never into cartoons, even as a kid. I was a snob when I was 5. I did not want to watch cartoons. I watched film shows. I watched Superman. I watched The Three Stooges. I watched, I don't know what else was on that was film, but it had to be film, live action. None of this cartoon shit. To this day, people make fun of me in a a gentle way, but they'll ask me about cartoons, and I'm like, Daffy Duck. He's a duck, okay, and that's all I know. They'll name cartoons, and I can't tell you exactly who they are. Elmer Fudd. Oh, he's got a rifle. It's like I just know from osmosis what I see from. So I never watched these shows. I never wanted to, and I usually had like one friend, except when I got to college. The first 2 years, I had no friends. You ever have no friends in your life?
No.
It sucks.
Yeah,
it really does. And I wasn't. And our family, my parents were great, but we didn't talk about serious stuff because, again, I was kind of closed off. So never talked about dating or any of that kind of stuff. When I finally got a girlfriend junior year in high school, I was mortified to even bring it up. I never said to my parents, I have a girlfriend, isn't that great? Or asked them for a ride. I would just hitchhike to her house. Never once brought them into it. It was too embarrassing for me to even bring that up to my own parents. So I think a lot of it was just being sort of isolated, self-isolated. And I don't know if that's where it comes from, but I'm sure glad it's over because I have a lot of great friends now.
Here's a delicate question. You said when you were a civilian, so to speak, not famous, you didn't have many friends.
Right.
Do you feel like then these friends that you have now, as good as the relationship may be based in some part on your celebrity?
No. I mean, you can smell that a mile away who wants to be friends with you for that. That's not nobody I would count as a true real friend.
No, but to attract them. You know what I'm saying?
No.
I don't mean just because you're famous or have money.
No. I think I became famous because I learned how to, or evolved into somebody who was a person that people might want to spend an hour with in their living room on the television. And that's the same reason why I have friends. It's because you're a person people want to spend some time with, because you evolved yourself in some way to be a person who is empathetic and amusing and fun to hang out with. I mean, you can't underestimate fun. Be a fun guy. I mean, that's one reason I wanted to do the podcast, to show that side of me that is just, I mean, of all the qualities I have, I would put just being a party animal who knows how to have fun right at the top of the list.
Did I know, you've said this famously, and I've said it myself a million times, where people go, oh, you've changed, like politically you've changed. And I've said, I'm still
Right.
for all the stuff I've ever been for. It's just, but I'm not down with the transgendered swimmer kicking everyone's ass in the pool. Like
Right.
I'm for gay marriage. I'm for pot. I'm for whatever we want to talk about. Prison reform, all the stuff I've always been, but I'm not
Right.
down with the crazy shit.
Me too. I mean, it's the same thing, and I keep trying to make this point. 5 years ago, no one was talking about defunding the police. No
Right.
one was talking about that. It wasn't me who changed. I'm just reacting to crazy shit, goofy shit that's going on now. I mean, you talk about the transgender swimmer. I was reading about the director of the movie Power of the Dog, Jane Campion, got into trouble because she said something like she was accepting an award and Serena and Venus Williams were there. And she said, you two are such marvels, but to be honest, you didn't have to play against the boys. I did. And of course, then cue the apology tour and the usual suspects who find this intolerable. And I'm like, what is the big problem? First of all, it looked like Serena and Venus Williams were laughing at it. Serena has admitted that when she played a man, she was shocked at how hard it was. She said, I hit shots that would have been sure winners against the women, and he got to them easily. And she was just making a case that the woke people should have liked, because what she was basically saying was, I'm competing in a place that was always a boys' club. There's only been one, I think, woman who ever won Best Director.
Yeah, Hurt Locker.
Right, Catherine Bigelow.
Right.
So it was a valid point to make. She wasn't demeaning them by saying that. And it's like, Jesus Christ, you always have to stay exactly within the one true opinion. You can't color outside the lines for 2 seconds without getting shot down. It's that kind of stuff. And, that's not conservative. That's just me reacting to something I think is goofy. I think you're being goofy. And I'm going to call it out like I always have. And if you don't like it, fuck you, kiss my ass, which is also what I've always believed.
Yeah, well,
always been my philosophy.
I mean, a lot when the COVID craziness was going down and everyone was saying to me to shut up about everything I was talking about. And I was like, I'm a comedian, so I get to say what I want to say. And I've always kind of felt that way. But boy, it's weird. I wasn't hearing anything out of the comedians during this period per se. And I was like, aren't they the tip of the spear for this kind of stuff?
Right. Because when it comes to, and I think you and I really are on the same page with this, and two of the only voices out there who were pushing back against COVID idiocy. I mean, COVID itself is fading, but the idiocy is not. I still see people with masks, young people, outside. The people who, the science. Well, there's no science for that, you moron.
Yeah.
You're not going to get it outside, and you're young, and the thing is mild now. And it's fucking over almost. Is there going to be another variant? Of course. There's always going to be another variant. The Spanish flu is still here. It's just the way this shit works. But the insanity of it, that was because when people are scared, when you induce this mass hysteria, which is what we did.
Yes.
And you scare people, fear, boy. I mean, it's not just political. It's medical's even worse. Because medically, there's nothing more basic than I want to live. And if people think that this is going to kill them, and of course it has killed some people, but again, that's also a very unsophisticated way to look at it, that COVID killed. Well, first of all, they didn't make any distinction often between died with COVID or died from COVID. For a long time, I think for a whole year, you could die from something if you had COVID even a year before, and they listed it as a COVID death.
Right.
So I'm not saying it wasn't a serious bug that was going around. Of course it was, and it should be respected, and we should have compassion for the people who suffered from it. But there's a lot of bad information, and my overarching theme has always been medical science. We're at the beginning of understanding the human body. I should be able to make my own decisions about how I want to treat this.
Yeah, I saw you mixing it up with Max Brooks on your show. Yeah. And I agree. Also, first off, we do this thing where it's like Joe Rogan and Aaron Rodgers, these nut jobs out there. I think Joe Rogan and Aaron Rodgers are doing okay. That's one guy just won the MVP of the league for the third. They're fit.
That's what I was saying.
Why?
That's what I was saying to Max, is that that's what started. I didn't intend to get into that subject Friday night, but we did, because I said there are two types of people who don't want the vaccine. Now, there's one type who I don't have a lot of respect for, because I think it's insane. It's a conspiracy theory that there's a chip in it, or just because it's what the Democrats do, which is a dumb reason not to get a vaccine. And if you are not in good health, if you are obese, you should get the vaccine. I implore you to get the vaccine. But people like Aaron Rodgers and Kyrie Irving and Djokovic, they don't need the vaccine. I understand that completely. When you are in perfect health, and these are athletes, their body is their life. They're very, very, very careful about what they put into their body, because they want to play as long as they can, because every year they play, they're making tens and tens of millions of dollars. So they have the ultimate motivation to keep that body in tip-top shape. So, of course, they don't need the vaccine. So the argument that he was putting forward that, well, what about protecting other people? That argument makes no sense anymore. Now that we know the vaccine does not protect people from getting it.
Right.
It does not protect people from giving it, or stop people from giving it. It just protects you if you have the vaccine. So don't tell me that I have to be part of this, what about protecting other people? Protect yourself. You get the vaccine. Get the vaccine, then you'll be protected, because you were never protected from me anyway, whether I had the vaccine or not.
Last subject, Bill. I see you, you recently, I think we're on with Ben Shapiro. You go places, you have conversations. And, people might think you and Ben are diametrically opposed in every fashion on every subject. But I've listened to your conversation with him, and there's a fair bit of common ground that you guys have. And if not, a chance to air out opinions on this side and on that side. And I've seen you on your show say to like Adam Schiff and stuff, like go, you're spreading your message on CNN. And something I've said, which is, if you're Fauci and you want to get people vaccinated and you're explaining that there's these Fox viewers who aren't getting it vaccinated, then go on Fox and tell them to get vaccinated. You're on MSNBC preaching to the choir. Everyone who's watching everyone who's watching Rachel Maddow's show is vaccinated. So why go on Rachel Maddow's show and talk about getting vaccinated? Why don't you go on Hannity and tell them to get vaccinated? And you do that. You go everywhere and do everything. I think when you were telling Adam Schiff, go on, Hannity and go tell him this stuff. Right. And he said, I've been invited many times.
Right.
But he won't go on. So how do we cure that? Why won't he go on, and what's going on?
I don't know if we can cure it. I don't know if we can cure a lot that ails us in that realm, the tribalism problem that we have in this country. But to me, the bigger reason to do that is not even to come to a meeting of the minds on issues, which we never will. I mean, I was very honest with Ben Shapiro. I said to him, look, the Republican Party does not believe in the emergency of climate change, and they do not believe, I think, anymore in democracy. I mean, 147 of them in Congress voted to not certify that election, which they know was a legitimate election. As long as those two things are what the Republican Party is built on, to me, they're not even savable. The Democrats I have a lot of problems with, but to me, they're still savable, and that's what I'm trying to do. Although we need both parties. We need at least two parties. We probably need 10. But that's not why I went on Ben Shapiro. I mean, that came up, and I want him to be aware of how I feel about that, honestly. But my bigger issue is stop talking about politics all the time. I can be friends with Ben Shapiro and never agree with on any of this stuff. We have to get to that place in this country because you're never going to bring people around. Everybody on the internet thinks you can own the other side. Right. You can own them and destroy them, or that you're going to convince them by arguing with them on Facebook or some bullshit like that. You're not going to convince people. You're not going to bring them over. Let it go. This is what we used to do. Just talk about a zillion other things that you can talk about. Connect on a wavelength that is not political. People are different. Accept that. Accept their differences. It seems, especially on the left, they have this need to make everybody conform to that one true opinion. And it's just never going to happen, and you just have to accept that.
Well, the problem with the one true opinion is, as we were alluded to, it moves and morphs so fast that we're having to cheer on males beating females in a swimming pool in order to stay up with the
right.
party. And it's like, then you're not into that. Now you're out.
Right.
Or on the outs.
Right. If you were a liberal feminist and went into a coma 10 years ago and just woke up and read that story about the swimmer, you'd think, wait, that's not liberal and that's not feminism. When I went into the coma 10 years ago, we were all happy about Title IX and women being able to compete, And now you're telling me that this person can come in here and, I mean, how many people, I think it was something like when he competed as a man, he was way back in the pack.
It was like 467 or something, ranked somewhere in there.
And now he's number one among the women. And of course the women cannot compete against someone. I mean, even if they're transitioned, I mean, you're born with muscle mass and I mean, I don't know all the science of it, but I've read it and it's very convincing and it's very obvious that this person
462. Look, if I've heard it said that, if he died or she died, the world's number one female swimmer, and somebody dug up her bones in 100 years, the bones would be the bones of a male. Like the archaeologist would go, that's a male human.
Right. And it does seem to sometimes happen that the politics, as you say, it morphs so much that it comes around to be the exact opposite of what it was. I was reading something that Andrew Sullivan was saying today, or maybe he was quoting somebody saying that it looks like the woke are trying to eradicate liberalism. I mean, racially, we see the same thing. I mean, again, I'm an old school liberal who believed in a colorblind society, that was the goal. That was what we were trying to get to, where we don't see race. Whereas it seems like what the woke want is to see it always and in everything. That is the overriding, isn't that the essence of a lot of what they're talking about? Is to always see it, and again, it's just the reverse.
Yeah, it always feels. I've talked to Dr. Drew about this. I know it's been on your show as well, upcoming episode. But I always say it feels gross, to go like as a woman of color, as a lesbian woman of color, like that to preface every fucking statement. I'd like to get out of this parking ticket as a woman of color, as a whatever, as a gay man. It's like it's 2022. Do your fucking job,
right?
Or don't. But let's not factor this into everything.
Right. And of course, I mean, I'm sure there are people out there saying, well, that's easy for you as a white man, Adam. And maybe
it was a white man who worked next to illegals on a construction site digging ditches out of high school.
And also, I mean, there's a myriad of factors that go into a person's life that gives you advantage or disadvantage. I mean, I don't think a young, good-looking black man going off to college in 2022 is at a tremendous disadvantage, you know, compared to a dweeby, ugly, untalented white kid.
Well, I've always said this. I said every guy I grew up with would date a woman of any ethnicity over an unattractive woman.
Right.
They would.
You're right.
They would, and you've been there, I'm sure. I've seen you at a few parties.
Right.
Where every guy I know would be with a beautiful black woman over a unattractive white woman first and foremost any night of the week. I don't know any guy who wouldn't do that.
Chris, well, I mean, that is a little more, to use the word of the day, problematic because, I mean, slaveholders had sex with their slaves, you know. I mean, you can have...
No, I mean a relationship.
Yeah, of course, I understand what you mean. I'm just saying that when you cross that sexual boundary, it can become something different. But maybe, you know, another way to approach that is Chris Rock used to have a famous bit about how he lived on the block with like all celebrities and then a dentist who was a white guy who was a dentist. You know, like you only had to be a dentist to be, and there is absolute truth in that in the history of America. And he was saying, like, even as rich as I am, like no white guy would trade places with me. Now, that may have been, I'm sure it was more true in the past. I don't know if it was even true completely when he said it then, but it's definitely not true now.
Yeah.
It's just definitely not true that no white person would trade places. I mean, I think John McWhorter has made the same case. You know, that's just an antiquated way of thinking. Now, there are certainly a lot of racist and racist adjacent kind of white people in America still who would never do that and trade. But I think the vast majority of people don't feel that way anymore. And if someone is like a rich, good-looking celebrity and they happen to be black, I think there's a lot of white people out there, certainly most of the people under 40, who would say, oh, I'd be happy to trade places with that person.
I'm rich and white, and I'd swap places with Chris Rock just so you could go on other people's podcasts and talk about jokes I've said.
Oh, yeah.
All right. The podcast is called Club Random with Bill Maher. It's premiered yesterday. Now, first guest, Bill Shatner, who I just did a show with, and
he's awesome.
I had dinner with him. I did a show with him. There's no more impressive 91-year-old human being on the planet.
No, what a badass. Or really, a lot of, you don't even have to put the age in there. I mean, he's just, what a career and, you know, what a great way of looking at life to be able to like say, you know what, I'm 90. I think I'll go into space.
Right.
Because I wouldn't go now.
Right.
And I'm not close to 90.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you quickly when we're talking about obesity and that kind of stuff. What's your regimen? I mean, you're always in good shape. You eat well, you exercise, but what do you do? I always like this sort of breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Okay, well, first of all, don't have all of them. You know, this 3 meals a day thing is just something someone pulled right out of their ass.
Right.
No, there's no scientific literature for that. It's just something people started to do. They could have said 4 meals a day. Some people have 4 meals a day.
Breakfast is the most important meal of the day, you know, invented by Kellogg.
Right, exactly, as the food pyramid was put out by the dairy industry, which, you know, gets back into the COVID argument. Like, you want me to just listen to everything you say as if you've never been wrong or never been corrupt about medical matters.
I know.
It's just not going to happen with me. But I regret so many of the years of my life when I sort of forced having 3 meals a day because it was just in my head. So what I do, I'm not really hungry the first hour of the day. So good. Then I have the 1 cup of coffee I have about an hour in. You shouldn't have coffee before that because, when you first wake up, you don't really need it. Your body is wide awake. You get that light in your eye. Okay. So that takes care of about the next hour or so. So I have my first meal, which is a shake that I make. It's got a raw egg in it and yogurt and a lot of good stuff, about 2-3 hours into the day. And then if I get hungry, and of course I get up pretty late, so I get up at like 11, so I have that around 2 or 3. If I get hungry around 6 or 7, nuts. Nuts is a great snack. There's no fat. It's mostly fat. Fat does not make you fat. It's a big misnomer. Carbs make you fat. That'll kill my appetite for another hour or 2, and then I'll have my second meal of the day. Just 2 meals around 9, and then
what do you have for dinner?
It could be anything. That's like more of a traditional meal. I mean, I'm not a vegetarian. People think I am. I don't think you should eat a whole lot of meat, but I'll have fish, chicken, anything. I'm more interested that the food that I'm eating is clean than it's vegetarian. I'd rather have an organic piece of meat than lettuce.
You're not doing the carbs for dinner.
No, I'm not doing the carbs at all.
Right.
I mean, very rare. I mean, carb to me is like maybe every couple of weeks I'm at a restaurant and I don't want to be an asshole and, I will have a hamburger bun or something. But I went on a real strict no-carb diet for a while. And then I just stayed on it, basically. I was like, once you get used to it, it's not that hard. I can have pasta that's made out of chickpeas. I can have pasta that's made out of spinach. I don't ever really need to have rice. Bread, a doctor once said to me, if I had 3 words to tell someone about health, it would be don't eat bread.
Yeah. I know. It's very simple.
It's
that's the part that's so vexing and frustrating when you're trying to tell the politicians, get the message out, would you please?
And like when you try to tell people about this, first of all, they'll be like, "You're a comedian. Why are you dispensing medical advice?" Well, don't listen to me then. Somebody asked me who I respect, and I'm giving my answer. Do you? But they look at you like you're from Mars because a lot of these concepts are just 2 meals a day. What are you, crazy? Bread's the most healthy thing in the world. Wheat. Well, okay, do some research. I can't tell you. Maybe you'll find something different. But that's how I approach it. And as a friend of mine says, abs are made in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Do I exercise? I do, but I also think people can overdo that. I don't think you need to do weight training 3 times a week.
No, but I do think that I've known a few beautiful people, men and women, who they eat whatever they want, they never work out, and they blah blah blah, and they always look good in their bathing suit. There's a few of those people out there.
Yes, there's 2 types of great bodies. One is made in the gym, and one is made by nature.
Right,
and you cannot ever approximate the gym one with the nature one. It's just a body type that you were born with, and it's magnificent.
Right. I agree, and you should definitely want to try to have sex with them.
Yes.
But I found those people to be amongst the laziest people I've ever met because they
don't have to.
They don't have that thing. For you,
right,
it's a 24/7. I mean, I would argue that the diet bleeds into the work ethic.
It's the same reason why great-looking pretty boy guys don't have a great rap to women because they don't need one.
Right.
Their opening line is high.
Speaking of high, Club Random with Bill Maher. Watch our episode. I think you'll catch on.
Oh, I loved it.
I had a good time, and I'll come back anytime you need me. First one was Shatner. We got Quentin Tarantino coming up, Judd Apatow, world-class directors and talkers and thinkers and writers. And, of course, Real Time. That's Fridays, you all know, on HBO. You watch it. Live dates coming up, Sugar Land, Texas coming up, and Tulsa, Oklahoma coming up. And you just go to the website, BillMaher.com. You go to AdamCarolla.com. I'm doing live shows all over the place, too. And until next time, it's Adam Carolla for Bill Maher saying mahalo.
Because when people are scared, when you induce this mass hysteria, which is what we did,
Yes.
and you scare people, fear, boy, I mean, it's not just political. It's medical's even worse because medically, there's nothing more basic than I want to live.